Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 8 college football rankings. So, going over last week's rankings and what those teams did in Week 7. Last week, at number 10, I had Tennessee. They barely beat Florida 23-17 in overtime. 9, I had Notre Dame. They easily beat Stanford 49-7. 8 was Ole Miss. They lost to LSU 29-26 in overtime. 7 was Alabama. They barely beat South Carolina 27-25. 6 was Penn State. They are another team that won in overtime as they beat USC 33-30. 5 was Miami. They were on a bye. 4 was Oregon. They beat Ohio State 32-31. 3 was Georgia. They defeated Mississippi State 41-31. 2 was Ohio State. They lost against Oregon 32-31. And 1 was Texas. They easily beat Oklahoma 34-3. But getting into this week's rankings and beginning things at number 10, I've got BYU. So BYU enters my top 10 for the first time this season, and it comes after they beat Arizona by a score of 41-19. The offense was great with 41 points. They put up nearly 400 yards of offense, and quarterback Jake Retzlaff was good with 2 touchdowns. BYU also ran the football effectively, rushing for 147 yards. And then defensively, it was a good game for BYU, allowing 19 points and forcing 4 turnovers. But after a good win over Arizona, they're now 6-0 on the season, and I've got BYU at number 10. Coming in at number 9, I have LSU. So LSU enters my rankings at number 9 after they beat Ole Miss 29-26 in overtime. It wasn't the greatest game for LSU. In fact, they didn't even lead until they ended up winning the game in overtime. But quarterback Garrett Nussmeier played well with 337 yards, 3 touchdowns, although he did have 2 interceptions. And then receiver Kyron Lacey had a big game with 5 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown. And then I think LSU played pretty well defensively, keeping a good Ole Miss offense to just 26 points. And LSU, they got the win over a good Ole Miss team. They stay in contention in the SEC, as well as they stay in the college football playoff race. And LSU has now won 5 straight since their opening loss to USC, and I've got LSU at number 9. Number 8, I have Alabama. So Alabama drops a spot from number 7 to number 8 in my rankings after they barely beat South Carolina 27-25. But this was the second week in a row where Alabama did not play well, as last week they lost to Vanderbilt, now this week they barely beat South Carolina. But Alabama did not play well. They actually could have lost the game, as they allowed South Carolina to recover an onside kick, but they were able to force an interception and hold on for the win. Quarterback Jalen Milroe didn't have the greatest game, as he threw for 209 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks, although also added 2 rushing touchdowns. And the Alabama defense was not great either, allowing 374 yards, although they did force 4 turnovers and got a big stop late in the game to seal the win. But Alabama able to escape South Carolina. I do have them falling a spot after a game that should not have been this close, but Alabama, they're at number 8. 7th, I've got Notre Dame. So Notre Dame moves up to number 7 after they beat Stanford 49-7, but it's really just a result of me moving some other teams down, and Notre Dame is at number 7. But they beat Stanford easily. The offense was great with 49 points and 447 yards of offense. Quarterback Riley Leonard had 4 total touchdowns, 3 passing, 1 rushing. Notre Dame ran the football very effectively, rushing for 229 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then defensively, Notre Dame was also great, allowing just 7 points and 200 total yards. And Notre Dame, after an easy win over Stanford, I have them at number 7. 6th, I have Penn State. So Penn State remains at number 6 after they beat USC 33-30 in overtime. It didn't look great for Penn State as they trailed 20-6 at the half, but they were able to come back and force overtime and eventually win it in overtime. Quarterback Drew Allar was pretty good with a career-high 391 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, but had 3 interceptions. And then tight end Tyler Warren was insane, as he had 17 catches for 224 yards and a touchdown. And then defensively for Penn State, they weren't great. They played their worst game of the season by far, allowing a season-high 30 points. They also really struggled to stop the run, allowing 189 rushing yards on 7.9 yards per carry. But Penn State, they were able to come back and beat USC on the road. They've remained undefeated, and I have them at number 6. 5th, I have Miami. They've remained at number 5. They were on a bye this week. Next week, they face Louisville. Coming in at number 4, I have Georgia. So Georgia drops a spot from number 3 to number 4 after they beat Mississippi State 41-31. They did win, but it wasn't the greatest game for Georgia. They did lead 34-10 early in the third quarter and were in control for the entire second half, so the final score makes it look a little closer than it was, but this still wasn't a great game for Georgia. The offense played very well, as they had 41 points, 609 total yards, and Carson Beck was great, as he threw for 459 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. But defensively, Georgia was not good. They allowed 31 points against a bad Mississippi State offense. Couldn't really stop the pass, allowing 306 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. But Georgia, they did get the win, even though it wasn't the greatest game, especially defensively. But Georgia, they did win, and they're only going to fall one spot from number 3 to number 4. Coming in at number 3, I have Ohio State. So I have Ohio State dropping to number 3, but I only have them dropping one spot, because this was a very close game on the road against a very good Oregon team, so I don't want to drop them too far for losing by just a point. But Ohio State, they lost their first game of the season, as they lost to Oregon 32-31. They had a chance to win it, but quarterback Will Howard tried to run, but he ended up sliding as time expired, and Ohio State was unable to call a timeout. But outside of his game-ending play, Will Howard played pretty well, as he finished the game with 326 yards and 3 total touchdowns, 2 passing, 1 rushing. And once again, true freshman receiver Jeremiah Smith was great, as he had 9 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown, although he did have a big offensive pass interference penalty late in the game that really knocked Ohio State out of field goal range. And then defensively for Ohio State, they weren't great. They allowed a season-high 32 points, struggled to stop the pass or the run. But Ohio State, after a close loss to Oregon, I still have them at number 3. Number 2, I have Oregon. They move up to number 2 after a big win over Ohio State 32-31. Their offense was great, especially considering it was against a great Ohio State defense. But quarterback Dylan Gabriel had a great game, as he threw for 341 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also had 32 rushing yards and a big rushing touchdown late in the game. Running back Jordan James had a good game with 115 yards and a touchdown, and receiver Evan Stewart was huge with 7 catches for 149 yards and a touchdown. Then the Oregon defense wasn't great, wasn't terrible either. They came up with a big stop to seal the game, and Oregon, after a huge win over Ohio State, I have them at number 2. And my number 1 team, it is Texas. They remain at number 1 after they dominated Oklahoma 34-3. Texas actually got off to a slow start, as they were trailing 3-0 at the end of the first quarter, but then they scored 34 unanswered points throughout the rest of the game, and they ended up easily winning. The Texas offense was good, and quarterback Quinn Ewers was good in his return from injury, as he threw for 199 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. And Texas also ran the ball extremely effectively, rushing for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns, while averaging 5.9 yards per carry. And then the Texas defense dominated. They allowed just 3 points, forced a couple of turnovers, and allowed just 3.5 yards per play. But Texas, after a dominant win over Oklahoma, they remain undefeated, and they remain at number 1. And my updated college football playoff predictions. So there's not a ton of changes from last week to this week. But number 1, I have Texas, the 13-0 SEC champion. 2, I have Miami as a 13-0 ACC champion. 3, I have Ohio State. I still think they'll win the Big Ten, just with a 12-1 record instead of 13-0. 4, I have Kansas State as a 12-1 Big 12 champion. 5, I have Oregon at 12-1. 6, I have Georgia at 10-2. 7, I have Notre Dame at 11-1. My 8th seed is Penn State, also at 11-1. The 9th seed is Tennessee at 10-2. My 10th seed is Clemson at 11-2. And my 11th seed, I'm going to put BYU there with an 11-2 record. And my number 12 seed, or the Group of 5 conference champion, remains a 12-1 Mountain West champion at Boise State. But those are my Week 8 college football rankings and my updated college football playoff predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications so you don't miss any other upcoming videos. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.